It's literally only a few days until Christmas, but we need to talk about the C64 again. Hello, how you doing? And welcome back to Wi-Fi Sheep at Christmas with me, Tom. Now, this wasn't a planned video, but the response to my first look review of the C64 has been huge. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody who has shown their support, and welcome to all the brand new subscribers, literally hundreds of you that have joined the channel. And you're all, of course, extremely welcome. And I have really enjoyed reading and replying to the comments on the video. There's been a lot of really interesting discussion, especially those of you that have taught me a few things about how the Commodore system actually works. So thank you for taking the time out to kind of share those ideas and thoughts with me. Reading through the comments, there was lots of questions about various aspects of this system. So I thought what might be useful is if we put together a quick Q&A just to go through some of the common questions that you might have about the C64. But before we go any further, here's a quick word from our partners at PCBWay.com. All through November and December 2019, PCBWay are offering some fantastic deals, ranging from everything from brilliant Christmas coupons, amazing offers on PCB manufacture and assembly, and that's not to mention cash rewards on electronic gifts. So the PCBWay Winter Shopping Festival for Christmas 2019 is running until December the 31st, 2019. You can find information and links in the description of this video, or go to them directly at www.pcbway.com. Now, before we go any further, I need to just tell you that I'm not being endorsed or paid by Retro Games Limited. This isn't an official channel of them, and the thoughts and ideas expressed in this video are purely my own. That said, let's get going with the questions. Why can't I buy it in the US? This has been a common question about those of you in the United States or North America trying to get hold of this. Basic answer, there's no distributor in the United States at the moment. My theory on that is perhaps there was issues with distributors taking the C64 mini stock and then not being able to shift it. The C64 Maxi is almost twice as expensive and takes up a lot more space, and maybe it was just too much of a risk for these distributors, hence why you can't get it in North America at the moment. If you're imported from the UK or the EU, how do you power it? Well, first of all, a lot of you from the United States have been reporting that you've been able to buy one and ship it over to America. Amazon UK and Amazon.de, that's Deutschland or Amazon Germany basically, do seem to be shipping all over the world. The issue is, of course, that you get a British 3-pin or European 3-pin plug with your system, and there's been questions about what additional or alternative power supplies you can actually use. Well, today my C64 here is actually being powered from a Raspberry Pi power supply, and the basic rule of thumb is that if you have a mobile phone smart charger or a Raspberry Pi power supply, someone can output a maximum of 5 volts and up to about 2 amps is probably the maximum I'd go, and it's got a micro USB on one end. You'll be fine to power up your system with that. How do you load and install firmware updates? Since I made my first review video, we've had an update to version 1.3.1 of the C64 and C64 Mini firmware. In order to download this, you need to go to the Retro Games website, that's retrogames.biz, and you'll find from the download section the latest firmware, which will download to a PC or Mac as a .bin file. Now, the PC or Mac may try to see this as a bit like a compressed zip file. There's no need to uncompress or open the bin file. You simply need to put it onto a FAT32 formatted USB pen drive or data stick. It has to be FAT32, so not exFAT or NTSF or any of the Mac or Linux file formats. Those won't work. Once you've copied the file across, put the data stick into the C64 or C64 Mini, and then from the options menu you need to select device settings and scroll down to system information. If it's detected the correct bin file, you'll then be presented with an option to download and install the firmware update. Now, something that was causing a bit of confusion was if it's different files for the different platforms. No, it's the same .bin firmware file for both the C64 Mini and the C64. It will do different things on both platforms. So, for example, a C64 version of Farming Simulator has been added to the Mini, but you won't get that on the Maxi system. Is it 6502 or FPGA powered? Basically, no. What is actually in this box is an emulator. It's an all-winner A20 ARM processor. Effectively, it's running a Linux kernel, so it's kind of like a Raspberry Pi board inside, and it's running the open source Vice C64 emulator, and there's a top layer OS interface for the carousel system for the games that runs on top of that. Does the Maxi have the same games as the Mini? Basically, no. Both have 64, 65 games, however, a number of titles were actually swapped out, and you'll find with the latest firmware that there's been additional things added to the Mini that don't appear on the Maxi or full-size system. Does it support composite or composite video? No, the system is only HDMI out. It is possible with third-party adapters you could convert a HDMI signal down to a composite video signal for analog devices such as the original monitors. I know this was something that was originally promised in the Kickstarter, and that's why Indiegogo crowdfunder for the device, and that's got some people a bit annoyed because they wanted to use it with their original monitors. There are ways around it, but fundamentally this is more a device aimed at the kind of domestic casual nostalgia market now, so it kind of needs to plug into more modern TVs easily, hence why it only has the HDMI out. Does it support cartridges? Other than virtual.crt cartridge ROM files, the answer is no. There's no cartridge slot in this, and there's no way of actually adding or plugging in cartridges. Can I plug tape decks or floppy drives into it? Again, the answer is no. It can only support USB data sticks being put into the device. Even USB floppy drives, someone did try this, don't work with this device. So there's no way of inputting original tape decks or original floppy drives into this computer. It is purely an emulated based system that uses ROM or disk image or tape image files that you load on USB stick. Can I use original joysticks? Technically no, you can't. It's again USB based, but I have heard and read of people that have got the original Atari 9-pin connectors to USB, and they've actually got those to work with the system. So it's possible, although officially the answer is no. Can you use the C64 mini joystick with the Maxi? Yes, you can, although quite why you'd want to, I'm not sure. I hated the original joystick, but never mind. Can you use the C64 micro switch joystick in the Mini? This is an interesting one. So yes, you can, but you need to perform the latest firmware. Basically, if you haven't updated your Mini, it strangely doesn't recognize or read the Maxi's joystick, which I thought was a bit strange, but if you do the firmware, that apparently fixes the problem. Can you switch joystick ports? Now, this is something that I actually came up against when we did the original first look video. By default, the C64 and the C64 Mini set the joystick to port 2. Now, with the Commodores, I've learned it was possible that you had 2 ports on it and you pulled the joystick out and you could switch between 1 and 2 depending on what the game needed. If you try to pull the USB joystick out and switch it between the 2, that isn't going to make any difference because it's a software emulation level. The way around this is you can add file attributes to the files of the ROMs. So in the case of Arkanoid that I was having issues with, I needed to switch it from port 2, which is the default, to port 1. So on the file name, I simply, at the end of it, just before the dot file tag, I put J1, and that will then force the emulator to switch it to port 1, and the game actually worked. There's a lot more details, including creating CJM files to actually set up characteristics and emulator behaviors, and that is all covered in the official manual, and I put a link to that in the description to this video. Can you use other USB controllers? Yes, you can, but not all. I have tried it with my clone SNES cheap controllers that you might remember we used with the Mini originally. Those seem to be fine. It is a bit hit and miss, but generally speaking, support does seem to be there for most generic USB controllers. Do external PC keyboards still work? In short, yes they do. They do still work with the Maxi, although quite why you'd want to do that when you've got the keyboard now, I don't know, but it is still a thing that will actually work. Is there a user port? No, there is no official I/O other than the 4 USB sockets on a device. So you can't tap into it. It's not like the original Commodore system or the sort of other clones that has been banded around, the stuff being made at the moment, which use more authentic hardware. This is a Linux-based emulator box. It's an ARM chip. It doesn't have the same I/O out as you'd expect on a more traditional or original Commodore machine. Can you add more games? Yes, you can. Officially not to the carousel system, but you can load additional disk images or ROMs from a FAT32 USB stick. Can it boot straight into BASIC like the original? Yes, you can now with the full-size C64 Maxi. There's an option in the menus to set it to either boot straight into Commodore BASIC or into VIC-20 BASIC instead of going to the game carousel. Does the shift lock key latch down? Now, not being an original owner of a Commodore 64, I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently people are asking me, the shift lock key on the keyboard, does it actually latch down when you press it? The answer is no. What happens is you get a little shift icon appear in the top corner of your screen. I guess this is probably due to manufacturing limitations. It's probably quite a complicated mechanism to make that work, and it probably wasn't worth the cost or the time to make it happen. So this software implementation has been done instead. Can you program in BASIC? Yes, you can program in both the C64 and VIC-20 mode. Can you program in assembler or machine language? Yes, you can on both systems, although you may need some additional toolkits such as compiler ROMs from cartridges, and you'll need to get those as software ROM files and add via USB stick. Can you save your own programs? Yes, you can, in exactly the same way as you would have done on original Commodore hardware had you had a floppy drive attached. It's exactly the same command, so it's the load, then it's my program, 8 to save and load programs, etc. It works by making a virtual floppy disk image onto your USB flash drive, assuming you've plugged one into the computer, and you can save and load all your files from that. Why not just use RetroPie, Raspberry Pi or PC emulation? Good question, and this argument has been bounding around for the past week, if not more, about people saying, why I could just make this with a Raspberry Pi, why bother buying this? Yeah, you could. I mean, I could. If I was really wanted to, I could make a micro that ran this with a Raspberry Pi. You've seen that in other videos on the channel where I've made my own custom sort of all-in-one micro type machines. I think you need to distinguish between what the market for this is, and it's more a domestic nostalgia, pick it up in the toy store kind of market. It's a box of games to relive a fuzzy nostalgia from 30 odd years ago. For those of us that are more technically inclined, you're not going to do an awful lot of hardware hacking with that, really. Saying that, it is possible to do things with this machine, which brings me on to my final question. How is the keyboard connected, and can it work with other boards and PCs? This was a question that kept coming up about how does this new keyboard actually work? And I found out literally last night, it is a USB type interface, although it doesn't use an internal USB plug. It uses like a Molex type circuit board connector, but it is USB being transversed via that connector. Somebody on one of the Facebook groups actually soldered a USB cable on the end of this and plugged it into their PC laptop, and lo and behold, and to great surprise to me, you can actually type on that keyboard and the PC will recognize it. What does this mean? Well, it means that theoretically, for those of us that maybe want to hack our systems or put in a new board like a Raspberry Pi to replace what's in there already, we can now theoretically do this, which means modded souped-up hybrid versions of the C64 are now very possible. In fact, we might get into a strange place where the keyboards and the cases of this system is actually more valuable than the games or the internals. So there we go. I hope that has helped answer some of the questions. Really interesting questions actually, and a lot of it I wouldn't have even thought of. So thank you to you if you've commented or asked that. I hope I've answered that the best I can. If there's anything additional or anything I've got wrong, please drop a comment to this video and just help the whole community out kind of correcting things. But generally speaking, I think that's kind of the state of play at the moment. I'm really looking forward to getting to know this machine a little bit better, and I've already got loads of ideas for some projects which we'll bring to Wi-Fi Sheep in the new year. So until then, thank you so much for your company. Have a great Christmas. I will see you in the new year. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, bye for now.